The Pacers front office has spoken about their goals for the season, young player growth, the health status of several key players, and the Monte Morris switcheroo. Oof. Lots to get to on today's Locked On Pacers podcast.
You are Locked On Pacers, your daily Indiana Pacers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, everybody? Happy Friday. Congrats. You made it through the weekend. Welcome into another edition of the Locked On Pacers podcast, where we, of course, talk about the Indiana Pacers. As always, my name's Tony East. I covered the team for Forbes. And today, the front office spoke for the Pacers. Chad Buchanan, the Vice Pres GM, Ted Wu, grabs the mic too. Ted, if you're listening for some reason, I'm sorry I got your job title wrong just now. And we have clarity on lots of things. I had many questions. All of them were asked by me or somebody else. We learned about how they hope this season looks in terms of success, the future of extension-eligible players, young wings, restrictions for centers, what this season might look like. And then, of course, Monte Morris, the big news of the week. Psych! Just kidding. Someone else is coming. We'll talk about that in the third segment today. I don't need to rehash all the same points I did the day that happened, because it's basically the same thing, just with different skills, and cut Monte Morris for Delon Wright. But that's not the most important thing. I typed out these questions, and I will kind of go through them generically first. But tonally today, if you haven't listened to it, I would say that philosophically, and that Chad Buchanan did a good job of he had a great answer when I asked him and them about what this season would look like in terms of success. How do they feel it this year? Because look, obviously every single NBA team wants to win every single game right in front of them when the season is starting, and that's great. But no Haliburton, no Miles, they lose two starters. How do you kind of approach that? And last year, they were coming off a conference finals appearance, and they still had all this young talent. And he was asked a similar question. In fact, I think that's a question I think that should be a question of basically every sort of GM or front office presser. But he said last year, when they did have Tyrese and they were coming off a good season, we want to win the day, right? Show steady improvement every day, get a little better, and of course, win games along the way. And that answer is really applicable at a time like this, right? Where you're going into a season where, look, they have the group that I predicted 42, 41-ish wins, right? Can be a low playoff to play-in team, maybe more. And if you're that, you were trying to win. And it's the same players that, besides Tyrese, Haliburton, obviously, and Miles Turner, who just made the finals last year and can do it. And so that answer applied again this year. And the way that kind of blanketed over everything, even though there's obviously injury questions with Ty and the centers and, all sorts of other stuff going on about what's going on. But the emphasis on internal development and the next man up and their culture, and how this focus of get better every single day and the team orientation, I think made an optimistic yet kind of grounded tone. And that, I think, was the right one, right? Because why shouldn't they be optimistic? They just made the finals. That's what makes the season so bizarre. And to me, so odd is it's going to be this team not wandering, but just figuring out what they are with the resources that they have and blah, blah, blah. That just was half a game away from a championship. And I think a lot of this day reflected that and kind of where they're going to go. First of all, Chad Buchanan started with a nice tribute to Nancy Leonard, much better than mine on this podcast yesterday. But again, cited all the right things there. But I think the outlook and what they're looking forward to this season being without Miles and without Tyrese is kind of what Rick told me. If you read my story I wrote after Summer League, when I talked to him out there, after I asked him about kind of how he views this and what's going on now, there has been no indication that the term gap year or a lean toward development is going to be their day one focus. Look, if the season lands you there, if a ton of guys get hurt and you're 20 and 35 or something, yeah, you should probably look a little more toward development than winning. But there is no illusion. They're putting on no facade. They're making it very clear. Day one, they would like to be a winning team, stay competitive, maintain their core identity, the hard play together as Pacers, and try to win that way. So rejecting the idea of a gap year, essentially. And I hated that term anyway. I still used it in my question just because it's become so prevalent, but that was one of the ones that I asked. Because to me, that was like, I didn't expect him to say like, yeah, we're not trying to win, blah, blah, blah. Like, but what do they actually hope everything looks like? And that answer will kind of apply to every year. I think they could probably use that every single year. But in terms of, they did address actually, the term gap year and staying competitive and all that. So I truly think this team going into the year is going to try to win every day. Another thing beyond individuals that I had in my questions, these aren't in order, but was one that I thought maybe would be better for Rick, but was still relevant, is their play style, right? How do they anticipate this year looking from an on-the-court product perspective? Because as has been debated ad nauseum all offseason, correctly, by the way, to be talked about a lot, was should they play the way they have with the group they have? And that's great. It's won them a lot of games. They were just in the finals. But Tyrese Haliburton is the engine of it all. They lead the league in passes because he's such a good passer. They play randomly, and he can really get that going, right? Their style is in a lot of ways because of him. Without him, should they keep doing that? Is it the best way for them to win with the group they have to play that way? But if it's not the best way for them to win anyway, should they still do it anyway? Because when Tyrese Haliburton is back, you'd like your team to be as good as possible at those things, right? And I think when you've heard players talk about what makes the Pacers work, Andrew Nemhard on the podcast appearance he did on Hello and Welcome last week, Obi Toppin at his camp, it seems like every player has identified, like, if we play within our system, we still believe that we can win, even without him. Maybe not to the same extent, but I think that the breadcrumbs recently, if you followed the trail, have been like, they're probably going to play the same way to the extent that they can, right? Because I think deep down they know, even if they try to play with as much zip and speed and randomness and all that, without Haliburton, it won't look the same. It won't feel the same. But trying to play that way, I think, is what they hope to do. But I still think they'll be – so first of all, I think they kind of explained that they want to do that, right? They want it to be about the style that's gotten them to this point. But without Tyrese, I think there was enough acknowledgement from the team that there might be a tiny bit less pace and a little bit more flip toward physicality as like focus is, and execution will just be that much more important, right? The margin for error goes way down, and you have to execute at a high level. You can't be messing things up. You can't be out of the system. And defensively, of course, and I could make the case and have that they might be a better defensive team than offensive team for this 1 year. If physicality is the name of the game, they should be better on that end of the floor. So guys in new roles or expanded roles, as they kind of discussed today, will be kind of key to all of this, their identity, how they adjust and all that kind of stuff. Drew, Ben, and Jarris, and we'll talk a lot about Ben coming up in a second. But I thought that those were the things generically that I wanted to know the most about from a team level. And I still would like to ask Rick Carlisle about the style. But just really as you go into a season, you want to know what your team hopes this year looks like. And for the Pacers, I think it's pretty clear. Try to win as much as they can with the group they have. And, of course, develop along the way, which has been working great for them the last 2 seasons. Can it keep working without the central guy? And then at the same time, keep developing their system while also making sure they're playing the right system that helps them do those goals. Because if you're trying to win every single game that you can with this team, you probably wouldn't play the breakneck speed style that you have the last couple seasons. You probably would slightly change things. So I think those 2 answers work in tandem and say the same thing, which is important for this. And it tells us where the Pacers are going. And I'm looking forward to hearing how Rick talks about the play style part, because as somebody who's done a good job putting people in the right seat on the bus, he'll have to do it again this year. And so figuring out what that will look like for him, the guy who actually, pulls the levers of who's on the floor with who and how they'll go, I'll be very fascinated to see all that. Let's get into some individuals, because that was another big theme of the day. Questions about Jarris. I had some of those. Ben Mathurin. Yep. We'll talk about some extensions. We'll talk about Delon Wright, Monte Morris. Ooh, so much more to get to as we continue here on Locked On Pacers. But before we do that, we got to talk about Skims. When I found out Skims was making underwear for men, I was intrigued. I've heard so much about their quality from friends and family. I had to give it a try. It lives up to the hype. I have 2 pairs now. I've had issues with underwear in the past for fit reasons, for comfort reasons, finding the right style when you're younger. Skims changes all that. Their men's line offers something for everybody, from boxer briefs to classic briefs, all designed with the perfect balance of comfort and style. I have 2 different kinds. I have the stretch brief and one of their boxer brief pairs. Love the stretch brief. I was boxers guy my whole life, still am sometimes, but switching to the stretch briefs was the best. It's been awesome. I don't know if I'll go back. They're sleek, lightweight, super comfortable. Feels like you're wearing nothing at all, but still secure where it matters most. When it comes to underwear, I've tried a lot. Skims is the best way to do it all. Shop Skims Men's at skims.com. Let them know we sent you. After you place your order, select a podcast from the survey and select the show in the drop-down menu that follows Locked On Pacers there. That is, one more time, Skims Men's on skims.com. Back here on Locked On Pacers, thanks for making it your first listen today and every single day. Number 2 listen for you today, Locked On Sixers. Quentin Grimes got offered what? He's not even coming to media day or their overseas trip. Jared McCain already has a thumb injury that's going to make him miss time. I think Paul George might be hurt or something. Oh, could it be more Sixers-y? Could it be truly, could it be more Sixers-y? Locked On Sixers will have more there. Okay, let's keep going. I got the generic team stuff. My individual player questions. I just typed in my notes here. My third one just says Mathurin future ? And that was not a theme, but a thing that got brought up today. A lot of questions about what is next for him, where this extension could go. Look, obviously, they acknowledge he's going to start at 2. He's got great scoring instincts. He wants to win. But the same thing. Again, this is not a Tony East or whatever your Pacers media person of choice is, made up thing. They said the same thing about the team system and his development within it being key this season and how that will influence kind of what his season looked like. And we've heard lots from Rick about sprinting to the corners, quick decision-making, and that was one they talked about today. Decision-making, defensive engagement, fitting into the team style, right? And I think that is what we've kind of known for a while. There's a couple seasons in a row of this, but this is a huge opportunity for him from a minutes perspective, from a role perspective, and I think the team realizes that as such a great natural scorer and a guy who Mathurin says this all the time. He's not lying. He will do whatever he can to win. That dude in Game 7 was going hard till the buzzer, right? Unforgettable moment for me that they were down a bunch and it felt over and everybody's almost crying on the bench and Mathurin's going hard on the court, right? Will do whatever he can. That has to channel into some of that stuff this year. The quick decisions, the defensive stuff, the system stuff. Now, what's the right balance of him being awesome being him and him being awesome for the team? That's been a constant discussion all summer, but it's been acknowledged by the front office that that's what the season is about too, is both of those things, getting him better on both tracks. As for extension talks, Chad Buchanan kept it private, ongoing evaluation for the team. Unsurprising answer there. I would still go with what my gut has been the whole offseason, that I would not expect a Mathurin extension. It just does. It seems like both sides are behooved to wait, but we'll see. I asked about a Nesmith extension. Same thing there. Does not private thing. Not a lot of stuff added on that from the team. I had a question that just says vet point guard ? I typed that one down before they signed Monte Morris, and they aren't signing Monte Morris. We'll get to this in the third segment, but instead of that, he is injured. He has a calf injury. Chad Buchanan shared with us, so they'll sign a different point guard, and it's going to be Delon Wright, who was on the Knicks last year. In the past, I quite liked Delon Wright. We'll talk more about that in the third segment. I don't want to get ahead of myself here. I had also typed down as questions I wanted to know Jackson and Wiseman restrictions ? Because those two guys, both coming off of their Achilles tears, seems like they're going right now every day. We'll see what their official outlook is for back-to-backs once the season starts, but they're pretty confident in the center group. I thought that was something thematically today. Both of those guys progressing. They believe in Tony Bradley as a depth piece. We'll see what happens there in camp. The floor spacing of Jay Huff with his high IQ, they like that. So I didn't get quite the sense. I think it sounds like a medical eval kind of deal going into the season. They'll see how they respond to this is the key part of it. They'll see how camp and ending kind of every single day of basketball impacts Jackson and Wiseman. I think that will be the last deciding factor when it comes to them playing back-to-backs. But if they're trending the right way, obviously. The fact that they're on the court now is good. They were both at Pascal's thing in Orlando. But I'll say this. I understand evaluating and doing what you can. If guys are ready to play, they're ready to play. I'm not gonna pretend like I know their medical situation. It's been almost a full year for both of them. That said, basically every Achilles player, go find them. Go look up their game log from the following season. They're either not playing back-to-backs or they're playing like half their minutes on back-to-backs. So I don't know what they'll do. Especially if they only keep 3 centers. We'll see. We'll talk about the roster battle. But that is at least something still that I am wondering about. But at least they explain what the process will be and how camp will be an influencing factor. My last question on here, I typed young wings ? I did want to know what they thought about Furphy, but honestly, that was more so about Jarris Walker, what their thoughts are for him. They acknowledge big opportunity for him to focus on a defensive role. The physicality and the rebounding, same kind of stuff that came up last year. Simplify the game, right? I thought something Chad said that was interesting about Jarris was that find a couple things that you're really good at and just nail those and then grow your game out from there, because he has kind of like, besides shooting, which is one thing that he's just constantly kind of been working on throughout his career, he has kind of just like kind of chased broad improvement, which is fine. He has a solid base. He's a fine player, but that is I liked that kind of framing of it, of like, and I've thought about this a lot with Doug McDermott, is the guy who makes me think about it. If you're like a generic player coming into the NBA and you're not an obvious star, have the ball all the time guy, is it better to do what Jarris is doing and kind of slowly bring up a lot of skills, or to do what Doug McDermott did and like 2 years into your career, be like, oh, I'm just going to do this like really well. And it got Doug McDermott a lot of money in a lot of years, but he had a very, very hard ceiling on what he could do. Right? There are 2 ways to go about this, but that is a way to get on the floor a lot, is be really good or pretty good at 1 or 2 things. I think that's what they hope to see from Jarris this year. I thought that was a very logical thing. So that was all of my questions that I wanted to get answered today. Obviously, a lot more came out of this. They really believe in Drew as a primary ball handler, as they should, right? He has a past of doing so. We'll see what it is over a full season. The team's basically been like, I think in the 43 games that Nembhard's played without Haliburton, with them both on the same team, they're 16-27. A lot of those from Drew's rookie year. Last year, they were 500, right? So I think they believe he can have a strong offensive impact while being a good defender. But the other thing they pointed to is leadership and stuff like that. We saw the picture Jenny Busick, I believe, posted it, of a lot of the Pacers guards up in Toronto together, practicing together. We now know that Andrew Nembhard organized that, right? That's step 1 on the leadership train. You got to be able to do that, to have people respond to you and listen to you if you're going to be the point guard for a team. I found that to be noteworthy. And of course, they once again lauded Pascal Siakam and his leadership and all the stuff that he's kind of brought to the team. Other stuff that got brought up, the continued hope that they play selflessly as a team. Chad with a nice story about how when he was at Summer League, he saw a pair of fans who were like parents wearing LeBron jerseys, and they were swinging their kid around, and their kid was wearing a Tyrese Haliburton jersey, right? Like that. The way they play has been invigorating to people. That is another reason I think that they believe and hope that their style can continue to do that. They were pushing back a little on the idea that the Eastern Conference is like weak or bad. And I don't know. So what I've kind of said, I've said this on this show twice, I believe. There's been studies that like even in the most extreme year where the West is way better than the East, that's only worth like 2 or 3 wins, right? 58 of your games are the same. So start there. Like the East does stink, to be clear. It's like a bad year for the East, but it's not so bad that it's like, oh, these teams are going to cakewalk into the postseason or anything like that. And like after the top 2 teams, I almost feel like anybody could beat anybody on some nights. So I mean, yes, the Eastern Conference is not strong, and that does help the Pacers if they want to make the playoffs in a year that many are kind of doubting them to do so. But they did not seem to step as far as to call it weak. Obviously, with the injuries and roster changes, it's different, but continuity will be a theme of the conference this year. And then, of course, their offseason changed a lot when Haliburton got hurt. They acknowledged that, and I think we've kind of seen how the moves made that shake out and change things there. But there was a lot today. Over 20 minutes, the Pacers have posted all of the answers from Chad and Ted Wu on their YouTube channel if you'd like to watch it and hear it for yourself instead of just me sharing my own opinions on it. But in general, kind of what I thought for most things. Look, with extensions, you're never going to get any in-depth answer. I would say in terms of like the biggest deal stuff, obviously the fact that they're one of their players coming to camp is literally different than we thought. That was actually new information. We learned on how they think their style will look and how they're hoping the season goes. And then a little bit more on Mathurin in terms of clarity. I thought those were the biggest things to come out of today. I encourage you to listen to it yourself. Make your own opinions on the tones and the answers and all that. And Media Day will be Monday. So we'll hear from lots of other players and coaches about all this as well. Let's talk about the other news from this. Monte Morris. That was fun when I got to be right for predicting him as a good signing for all of 2 days. He's not coming to the Pacers. Delon Wright is instead. What happened? What does Delon Wright bring? Is this good? We'll talk about it to close out today's Locked On Pacers. But first, we need to talk about the great people over at FanDuel. The NFL season is here, and FanDuel is making sure you're ready for kickoff with a can't-miss offer. Crazy game between the Seahawks and Cardinals last night. I started Kyler Murray in fantasy like an idiot. But if you're locked into a game like for that reason, FanDuel could be great for you. And if you're a new customer, just bet $5. Guess what? If that bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets that you can use across the app. Many people love using FanDuel because it fits however they like to bet. Build a big same-game parlay. Perfect. Player props. Yep. Jumping in on live action while the game unfolds. You got it. Makes every game more exciting, whether you're like me and just seeing what your fantasy players are doing or watching your own favorite team. It's a good way to do it. It's quick on FanDuel. It's easy. It's the best way to add a little more energy into your football days. If you're ready to play, download the FanDuel app right now by visiting FanDuel.com to get started. That's FanDuel.com to place your first $5 bet. We're back here on Locked On Pacers. Thanks for making us your first listen today and every single day. Or second listen, Locked On Suns. Matt Ishbia talk. That's always good for a good quarter or two, although I thought he actually nailed it on the state of his team this time for once. So Locked On Suns love more on what's going on that team and the things of that nature. Did a whole podcast on Monte Morris on Wednesday, Tuesday, whatever that was. And here's the thing about that. If you go back and listen to it right now, every like generic thing about why the Pacers are going to point guard, what this means for their camp battle, all sorts of stuff like that, most of it holds the same as what I'm about to say. So this is only going to be one segment instead of a whole show. But it's not Monte Morris anymore. We learned, I just dropped something on my desk. We learned today that Monte Morris, that was the plan. Psych. He has a calf injury. He is not coming to camp at all. So that's not going to happen. Chad Buchanan said they're potentially going to look for another guard. And we already know now who it is. It's going to be Delon Wright, who was with the Knicks and Bucks last year. So, yeah, Bucks-Pacers rivalry gets another key figure in the middle of it. There was a time when I really liked Delon Wright. Like his defense when he was with like Miami and Memphis, you know, the like early 2020s, really late 2010s with Toronto, was like, man, this guy can be really pesky. His offensive impact has dropped some. He turned 32 this year, but he still has that kind of tenacity. That's where his focus is. So this is different than Morris, where Morris was clearly this steady hand, never mess up kind of turnover machine. Whereas I think this is an opposite player, sort of, in Wright's case, where he's better on defense, but doesn't have the same level of caretaker skills on the offensive end. But the key thing here is they clearly have identified, as I talked about Monday, why they potentially would need a point guard for camp, right? Specifically today, we learned more about Ted Wu said, listening to our coaches, having more ball handlers and more playmaking is important to them, right? So the style of play and the coaching staff suggested, hey, we need an experienced point guard, right? It's two reasons. Before we talk about Delon Wright specifically, it's one, if either Nembhard or McConnell go down, they're already immediately relying on either good player but not point guard Quentin Jackson, Ray J. Dennis's inexperience, or Cam Jones' no experience. Don't get me wrong. I think they like to figure out what Cam Jones is this year, but they need experience, right? They're trying to win, as we have identified in this. And two is they like to play 2 point guards together sometimes. And you can't really do that if you only have 2 point guards in your rotation. It's not easy to do. You're putting too much on your shooting guards to make up other minutes. So here we are, point guard number 3, Delon Wright, who, if he made the team, would logically make sense to allow a lot of what they want to do to be possible. So Delon Wright, last year, better with the Knicks than the Bucks. The Bucks traded him to the Knicks mid-season. He played 40 games, started 7 of them, shot okay from the field. With the Knicks, he shot 47%. With the Bucks, he shot 27%. So this is like a tale of two seasons that makes his generic stats for the year. 34% from the field. Yikes. But with the Knicks, he was fine, right? 4.3 points, 2.1 assists per game in a small role. That's fine. His efficiency for his career, 35% of his threes, 45% of his shots, 6.7 points per game. He eclipsed double digits a while ago, but offense is not his thing. I've always thought his defense was better. His offense has fallen to the point that like his defense has to be really good to keep him on the floor. But this is, if it's your 15th guy, that's fine, right? And so I'll be fascinated to see what he's got left, what he can bring to the Pacers. But they have clearly identified that a point guard is something that they want. And Delon Wright, who they played in the playoffs last year, is here to do it. And so that's guy number 15 now instead. It sounds like their camp will be 20 or 21. So, and especially if they have Jalen Slauson coming for sure. So the competition stuff remains. And I think that is, when it comes to the kind of what they've mentioned leading up to camp, is still kind of the same deal. Do they need 4 centers? Which I would say today, by the way, them talking about Jackson and Wiseman's health would suggest that maybe they don't, right? Maybe they still believe in just having 3 and Toppin can be your 4th center. We'll see. Tony Bradley will be coming to camp. Or do you need a 3rd point guard? What do you need more? Because James Wiseman keeps getting and I keep doing it because it keeps happening, but he's floated in these conversations of the roster battle. I would say him having guaranteed money and their belief in him 2 years in a row means he's not actually in it. He's technically in it because his contract's not fully guaranteed, but James Wiseman's making the team. So that's 14 guys. The other 13 have guaranteed contracts. So it's really Slauson, who's, a wing body. Any E10s they bring to camp. And then the other 2, Delon Wright and Tony Bradley, competing for that last spot. And it might not even be which one's better in camp. I mean, that should be the decider, but roster-wise, it might literally be, do we want 4 centers or 3 point guards? And I've had this discussion a million times, but now we know who the cast of characters are. At least I think so. I thought it'd be Monte Morris. And so if Delon Wright has a fine enough camp, I would think that he would be above Tony Bradley in line for the pecking order to get the last spot. Look, they have all the information possible about what Tony Bradley could do for them and what they need at guard, and they still added Delon Wright, right? The most up-to-date information says they felt like they needed a guard. So we'll see what that means for this roster battle. But I think Delon Wright's got a shot to be on the Pacers this year, and if it doesn't go well and his contract's not guaranteed, great. Maybe they could turn around and look to sign Monte Morris during the season or something. Who knows? There's always a million ways these things can go. Calf injury, scary, no fun. I say they hope, for Delon Wright, because I've learned this year I've got to be careful with my phrasing on these reports, right? If I learn that a player might be signing with the Pacers, Alex Len thought that was happening. That was the plan. And then turns out the Mark Williams trade doesn't happen and he goes to the Lakers. And then this happens with Monte Morris where, yep, that's the plan. Just kidding. So a lot of planning to sign is going to be coming from Tony East now. But I believe the Pacers' hope with physical pending and Delon Wright's hope is that he will be on the team for the start of training camp. So that's why I have the switcheroo there. An injury has led to this. And we'll see what Delon Wright looks like in their system. But he's actually a little taller for a guard. In the past, this is the type of player that I like. Taller guards I like, really pesky defender. And because he's a good defender and a little taller, you're not going to ask him to do this, but he can play the 2. When he played with, I think it was the Hawks, he played a lot next to Trae Young earlier this decade. I think it was the Hawks. I think it was earlier this decade where he was next to Trae Young a lot, enough that it was oh, this is actually an off-ball guard. So he has that level of experience. So if they want to use him as one of the guards in 2-point guard lineups, I think he has the experience to do something like that, which makes him an appealing fit. So that was the last thing learned. That wasn't said during the press conference, but that is now a thing out floating in the ether, and we'll see what that means. But that is the where the Pacers are of the year. We'll learn much more on Monday for Media Day. But Delon Wright joining the Pacers. We'll talk more about him next week, actually, because the schedule got changed this week because of Monte Morris. So we haven't done the point guards preview. I got lucky that I waited. So next Monday will be that. It will be Nembhard, McConnell, and Delon Wright season previews. Let's talk a little bit about Haliburton. The Halimart was on Thursday. That was very cool. Very cool. They really went all out making that an experience. Tyrese Haliburton was there for a long time. Anyway, point guard preview Monday, and then that's Media Day, and then it's training camp. So the season is basically here. One more offseason podcast. Thank you all for rocking with me. You can find me on social media at Tony R. East. This podcast is on Instagram and Twitter at Locked On Pacers. Everybody have a great weekend. See you on Monday talking Pacers point guards.